This is an overview of the Apple MacBook Pro 13-inch laptop. Apple laptops are typically considered to be very high quality, but they also typically come with quite a high price tag. And here it is up close. This is the 2010 version of the Apple MacBook Pro laptop. There is a slightly newer one, a 2011 version, but in terms of the actual design of the laptops, they are essentially the same. The weight of this 13-inch MacBook Pro is 2 kilograms. It's kind of a standard weight, slightly on the heavy side, but that is going to be down to its aluminium casing. And the aluminium casing itself is very nice. It's like a brushed metal look, and it is very nice to look at, this laptop, and it also feels very sturdy as well. So in terms of the ports and buttons to the exterior of the MacBook Pro, firstly there's the actual lid, and the lid just snaps down into place very neatly on top of the laptop. There's no kind of clasp or anything like that. I think it's probably a magnetic catch. That's really nice. You've got a little power readout button here, and this will flash if the laptop's in sleep mode, for example. Moving around to the side of the laptop, firstly you have this button here, which when pressed tells you what the current charge is. I don't really use that myself. I think that's probably more of a gimmick than anything else. Some people might find that useful though. Moving on, you have your headphone jack and SD card slot, 2 USB ports, a mini display port, so you would use this port here to connect to your external monitor, for example. Which is fine. It means you're going to have to get, it's not HDMI and it's not like VGA out, so you're going to have to get a specific cable, and Apple typically charge you about 20 quid to have one, which I always think seems to be quite expensive. You have a FireWire port here, Ethernet port, and a magnetic port here for your power cord. Now it's really good with it being magnetic because it just snaps into place really easily, and if say you're walking along and you accidentally catch the cable with your foot, the power cable just snaps out really easily. It doesn't bring the laptop with it. On the other side, if I bring it around here, Kensington lock there, and also all you have there is a very understated DVD rewriter drive there. Opening up the laptop now, firstly you see what I think is a superb trackpad. This is probably one of the best trackpads I've ever used on any laptop computer, really. It's a very good size, it's very easy to use, very responsive. Clicks are typically just one tap of the keyboard. If you want to bring up the right mouse button equivalent like you would on a Windows machine, you either click in the bottom right hand corner or you control click on the device as well. The keyboard itself is also excellent, very easy to type with. It's a backlit keyboard, which makes it easy to use in any light conditions. The screen itself, as you can see here, is a glossy screen. Now with the 15-inch MacBook Pros and 17-inch MacBook Pros, you can choose to pay a little bit more and get an anti-glare screen. Typically that's about 100 quid more, I think. And at the top here you should be able to detect there's a little webcam at the top as well. In terms of the screen on a MacBook Pro, I really do think it is superb, and it is probably one of the best screens I've ever come across on a laptop. The brightness and the contrast ratios really are superb. There is a slight drawback with the reflections. You might just be able to see some reflections creeping in here, and that is slightly annoying, particularly in bright light conditions, but as I did mention, you can pay a little bit more and get the anti-glare screen for your MacBook Pro, and that should help alleviate that problem somewhat. In terms of battery life, they say on the website that a MacBook Pro will typically last for about 7 hours. I've found that in reality though, you're more likely to get about 4 hours worth of battery life on average use with the screen set to moderate brightness. In terms of memory, the 2010 laptops typically came with around about 4 gigabytes of RAM. That can be doubled up to 8 gigabytes. However, with the 2011 version of this laptop, you can actually double that up again to 16 gigabytes of RAM. I thought it would be useful to compare the MacBook Pro laptop that I've been talking about here with an alternative PC laptop, which is more of a budget, in the budget range. So this is the MacBook Pro, but beneath it here I've got a Dell. This is the Dell M5030 laptop, and Dell make pretty good machines. In terms of size, it's slightly larger at 15 inches as opposed to the 13.3 of the MacBook Pro. But in terms of specifications, it's got similar memory and hard disk size. It's also got a DVD rewriter. And also, if you look at the actual connectivity and the ports, they are relatively similar. It's got a VGA out port instead of the mini display port. But apart from that, it is essentially the same. So this Dell that I've got here is about a third of the cost of the MacBook Pro 13-inch. So what are the differences then? Well, the first differences to point out is that of build quality. This Dell is predominantly built out of plastic, and it definitely feels a lot less sturdy as opposed to the aluminium casing that you got on the MacBook Pro. It's probably slightly lighter as well as a result of that fact, but it doesn't feel as sturdy. Opening up the laptop, you'll see that it's got a similar trackpad and keyboard layout. The trackpad itself, again, is not as good. It's not as easy to use, and it's also slightly smaller. Also, you can't use the same amount of multi-gestures that you could with the Apple MacBook Pro. The keyboard layout is very similar, but it is an inferior keyboard. It feels more plasticky to use. The keys are not backlit either, as they were with the MacBook Pro. The chip with this one is an AMD chip as opposed to the Intel dual core chip with the MacBook Pro, and that might have some impact in terms of speed of using various applications. You'll also notice when using a laptop such as this that the hard disk is noisier, and you'll hear the hard disk running in the background. The other thing is the screen on the MacBook Pro is going to be superior to the screen on this one. The contrast ratios are going to be greater, and it's just going to look better basically. So with the Dell laptop, you'll typically be using Windows 7 as the operating system. With the MacBook, you'll be using macOS instead. Whether one is better than the other is quite subjective. Essentially, they both perform the same function. It's worth pointing out though that with MacBook you can dual boot, or you can run Windows 7 on top of your Mac operating system. There's software called VMware, which isn't too expensive to purchase, and it allows you to run both operating systems simultaneously. So does the superior build quality and design of the MacBook Pro justify the expensive or the massive price difference between the two laptops? Again, I think that's probably quite subjective. I think for some probably it is worth paying the extra, and for others it isn't. I would say though that you are probably paying quite a lot, or there's quite a premium associated with the Apple brand, and you don't necessarily get that with some other laptop manufacturers. So that's my overview of the Apple MacBook Pro 13-inch laptop. In conclusion, I think they are exceptional devices. The build quality and the design of the MacBook Pro really is excellent. The trackpad is probably the best trackpad I've ever used on any laptop. The keyboard is also very good. The screen is very bright and clear. It really is a very nice laptop to have. There is one downside with the MacBook Pro, and it is a pretty big downside, and that is cost. MacBook Pros are very expensive, and you are also paying a premium for the Apple brand, and that can be quite costly. So it's worth considering whether it actually is worth paying the extra money for a MacBook Pro as opposed to a PC equivalent, which will be potentially half the price. There we are. I hope you've enjoyed this overview, and if you'd like to check out some more reviews, you can go to my YouTube channel, which is TechSaver UK. Thanks.